welcome everyone. On that note, today we have a really amazing session. We'll be talking to two social change makers who are making a really big difference in the lives of people every day. My name is Nazia Ahmed. I'm the director and founder of the Social Outcomes Lab. We are a social impact consulting firm, and we work in economics and management consulting across the health and human services sector. SICON is a really exciting thing for us because it's all about celebrating social change and social change. So today we've got Dr. Kate Burrell, who is the co-founder and the Chief Impact Officer of Street. And we also have Daniela Verkic from Crofmay, a Canberra-based social enterprise that is focused on providing meaningful employment to differently abled youth. So it's really exciting because Street is a cafe social enterprise, and Crofmay is a social enterprise focused, as I said before, on donuts making a difference. So today we've got coffee and donuts and social change. So all of my favorite topics and all my favorite people rolled up together. So I just wanted to say massive welcome and thank you, Kate and Daniela, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nazia.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have lots of fun in the next hour and a half. It'll be mainly like a conversational style setting. We really want to get to know not only the social change work that Kate and Danielle are doing, but about the people as well. So who are Kate and Daniela, and what's kind of driven them to be the amazing people that they are, and how can we all be a little bit of a Kate and Daniela as well. So that's kind of how we're going to structure today's session. You'll get to hear from both of them around their brilliant social enterprises. In terms of kind of housekeeping, so we'll have a question and answer session right at the end in the last 15 minutes. So save your, you can put in questions as you go into the Q&A box or the chat box, and then we'll answer them and respond to them towards the end. So get ready, grab a coffee, get your donuts, and let's have a really wonderful time together. So I'm going to kind of start just by doing some brief intros, and I'll kind of let Kate and Danielle talk about them themselves. So Kate, let's start with you, and I'm just gonna call you Kate and not Dr. Kate every time.
Please.
If that's okay.
Nobody calls me Dr. Kate, so don't do that. It sounds like some bad TV show.
But I do want you to talk about your doctorate. And so tell me about your story. What's been your journey? Tell us a little bit about everything about you. So not just your academic background, but your life background, and what's kind of made you go on a journey of being a social change maker.
Oh gosh, just that small question. Wow.
Yeah.
What a way to start. Thank you, Nazia, and it's so good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I feel really honoured being here with Daniela as well. And I know there'll be lots of people in the audience who have fantastic experience as well. So yeah, it's very exciting to be here. I always find this question really difficult because you have to live life forwards, but it pretty much only makes sense looking backwards, or you can make sense of it looking backwards, and you can tell lots of different stories about yourself and about your life journey looking backwards. So some of the things that sort of stand out to me, I was thinking, what makes anyone a change maker? And sometimes it's about sort of the atmosphere you grow up in. Sometimes it's about the personal experiences that you have. Some people have fire in their belly from the start around injustice. My wife, Beck, the other co-founder of Street, was like that from the get-go. I was kind of more sort of slow and steady. I was incredibly lucky as a child born into a beautiful family. We had no significant issues. We were white, we were educated, not suffering extreme trauma or mental illness. So there's a whole bunch of absence of things that sort of gave me a bit of a head start. I had parents who didn't hurt me, who celebrated their children, really valued education. And if I think about some of the personal attributes, like my dad is this kind of left-leaning, like if you crossed a mad scientist with a sea captain, that's kind of him. And he's this sort of big personality wrapped up in a bit of a rat bag, big picture, sort of not really a troublemaker, but someone who's going to stir the pot to make the world a better place. And very strong believer that, you know, everybody should do everything they can, not just something, but everything they can. And then my mum was a much more quietly spoken, very polite, never wanted to offend anybody, social worker by training, turned teacher when she had 3 little kids, and she wasn't raising us alone, but Dad was working, reasonably traditionally, long hours, and so Mum was picking up much more than her fair share in the family home there. So the kind of big picture, little picture, but the common elements were caring about people and giving a damn. Dad didn't care what Mum thought. Dad didn't care what people thought, and Mum probably cared too much about what other people thought. So there's a sort of balance there of speaking out, but also holding your fire a little bit. And I guess I kind of muddled out and popped out in the middle with a mix of those attributes. What else? Originally I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to be a vet or an architect or a pilot, fly planes. No idea why. They just seemed exciting things to me. Turned out that I understood people, and it was one of those things where it took me almost a decade to realise that the things that came naturally to me and that I was good at and that I was getting good marks in at uni weren't the same things that everyone else naturally sort of saw the world that way. So I started out in community mental health as I studied clinical and forensic psychology. It was like breathing air. And I don't mean it was easy to study. I had to work hard to do the actual work, but just, that was the lens through which things made sense to me. And then that layered on top of this sense that that if you've got skills or if you've got privilege or if you've got capability, then you should be using that responsibly. And so that sort of shaped my direction a little bit. I think I spent a lot of time, I have this starfish story where I think about starfish on the beach and how you can walk along and you can pick up every starfish that's stranded and gently put it back in the water. And that matters to every single starfish. And it's important to do. But if you look up, there's thousands of starfish. So do you just keep helping every starfish, or do you start to think about holding the tide back or putting system things or structural things in place that might mean that you can't get to these next 100 starfish, but maybe then in 6 months you can help 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 starfish. So for me, it became a question about what's the right level. And I knew I could make a difference individually. I ended up moving to into government and foreign affairs and trade and working there, sort of giving behavioural science advice in counter-terrorism, which sort of led to my PhD, which was an interesting sidetrack. But ultimately what it was about was building bridges for people who felt excluded back into society. And then at the same time, Beck and I moved from Canberra. Hello to everybody in Canberra. We moved down to Melbourne to set up Street, to co-found that together with our little baby son, Will, who's now 12. And in our current lockdown stage sits 1 metre from me doing his homeschooling every day. So we've learnt a lot about each other in that period. But setting up Street, I think for me was finding for me the right level between every starfish on the beach versus really zoomed out big picture. Do you move the moon so you can change the tide? And social enterprise represents for me a way of making system change whilst being grounded enough to make a difference to each person. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I think it's really important for people interested in this space to find the right level for themselves. So that's the right level for me. And everyone will have a different story around. That's not that that's the right level. It's just the right level for me.
I love that.
Probably enough rambling from me.
No, not rambling at all. I'm already inspired by so many things, so I can only imagine how I'm going to feel and how everyone watching is going to feel in like an hour and a half. What an amazing story, and I loved how you kind of drew references to your parents and everything, kind of starting at home and the journey that you took. It's interesting. I wanted to be like a ballerina or a dentist, and then ended up being an economist. So you never know where you never know. Kind of,
it makes sense looking backwards, but you can hardly ever make sense of it looking forward. When you were 16 or 18, how do you know what you want? How do you know?
Exactly, right? Exactly. But then how amazing, because and we'll be hearing more about the 16 and 18-year-olds that you guys help in figuring out what to do. So I'm super keen to hear about those stories. So we'll hear from Daniela, and I'll ask you the same question. What's your story? What made you kind of want to become a social change maker, and tell us a little bit about your journey to date.
Nazia, you could say I fell into it. So I have a son, Anthony, who has Down syndrome. When he was born, it was my first real introduction to disability. I had no idea what I was actually in for. And one of the things was when he was born, I looked at him and I just thought, I started to cry, but it wasn't because he had Down syndrome. It was actually, I was actually mourning his future. What was his future going to look like? How was I going to, or how as a family were we going to assist this young man in his future? And it really wasn't until I was actually faced with reality that my life changed, and it absolutely changed for the better. So when Anthony was in high school, my husband and I decided that we really needed to do something to make a difference, at least to our son's life. So we started off making donuts at a market stall. But prior to that, I was actually working in the public service for a little while, and I started testing the donuts at work to see whether they were a good thing. And yes, they were. By all accounts, people from other sections, every time we had a morning tea, people were coming from other sections when they found out that the donuts were on. So, we knew we were on a good thing. So the recipe is actually my mother's recipe that we've had to learn to upscale, which is my mother was a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and this is the amazing donut that you get. But it wasn't so easy to actually upscale the recipe. Fast forward to 4 years ago, we actively launched the business. So we had our first market stall at the Old Bus Depot Markets. And that was something that we did every Sunday, and our son was actively involved in the production and the selling of the donuts at the time. We're actually producing them hot at the time. 3 months later, we decided to introduce another young Down syndrome person into the business, and he's still with us. 4 years down the track, he's still working with us and absolutely loves coming to work every weekend. He still works weekends predominantly. Fast forward to 2020, we now have our own bakery. We produce donuts. At the moment, we've had to scale back a little bit because of COVID, but Thursdays through to Sundays. We have a delivery system, and ordinarily we would have up to 7 or 8 pop-ups going around town. We're actively looking to expand our enterprise interstate. So we have had conversations with the Franchise Council of Australia. The beautiful CEO, Mary Aldred, just has absolutely embraced what we're doing. It would be a first for them. So they're backing us all the way. But obviously COVID has unfortunately put a bit of a stop to that. But for me, having or knowing that I'm actually making a change, knowing how to do it, I'm a very passionate person. I'm not stopping at donuts. So one of my real passions is I would actually love to see Australia to be a leader in disability employment, and that has actually driven me to develop a program called the Team Coach program, which we received a federal government grant for, and that's in development at the moment. So we're actually widening our reach to private employers and also the public sector as well. And it's just something that's just so dear to me. We're providing employment opportunities to people that ordinarily would have not had a chance to be employed at all. And we're breaking down those barriers. And I'm really, really excited about the future of this space.
It's super exciting. And in fact, this week or last week, you were presenting at a Senate hearing, right? On employment.
That's correct.
For children with and young people with autism. So we'll hear about that hopefully in more detail soon as well. I mean, it's really interesting. Just a few minutes into our session, I've already heard from both of you that you started with, a particular idea, helping a particular set of people, but now you're both actually tackling systems. So moving away from, the particular people that you're helping, and then and I love the starfish analogy. I'm gonna use it all the time. And of course, because Kate, and hopefully we'll hear about that from you as well, that you and your partner Beck, who was our keynote address as well, are working on Moving Feast, which is a completely different way of shifting the food system as well. So really, really amazing. So we're going to now launch into getting a little bit more of a detailed overview of street and croquet. And so, Kate, I was wondering if you'd like on the amazing work next, and then we could have some more discussion.
Oh, no worries. So I'm going to press this little screen share button here, and hopefully it will work. And
looking good.
Somebody can give me a thumbs up. Nazia, is that working? Can we see the?
Well,
brilliant.
Well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, excellent. So, Street to Hospitality Social Enterprise, we work with young people who need a hand to get and keep work. There are so many kind of ways to describe the young people we work with. They fall into so many different descriptions. They have so many different attributes. It's really easy to describe people by their barriers. But the common thing across all of the young people we work with is that they want work and they need a hand to get it and keep it. So that's sort of where we keep the high level description. And I'll talk about some of the details in a minute. I talked a little bit already about why I started Street. Beck has a whole different story, which literally ends up with people in tears every time, because it's about her having this epiphany experience in Vietnam where she ends up crying into the rice paper rolls. And you'll see that's the last point down here: rice paper rolls, starfish, and the tide. It all kind of comes together. But in nuts and bolts, we were outraged that so many people were locked out of the system, and the two kind of umbrella issues that sort of seem to scoop up a lot of the specific issues are unemployment and homelessness. But of course, somebody doesn't become unemployed or homeless as a result of one situation or one incident. There's generally at least half a dozen things that are a problem that society is putting in the way for that young person. So it was basically around injustice is where we kicked off there. I'm not going to go through definitions of social enterprise because I'm going to assume that your listeners are aware at least of that. This is just a couple of the examples in Victoria. There's about 3,500 social enterprises in Victoria and many others across Australia as well. The expression that I like best around social enterprises, and I'm a bit of a convert on this, but B Corps are fantastic, not-for-profits are great, for-purpose organisations I'm talking about, but social enterprises I think are particularly good because they're like empathy enterprises. So they're businesses, but it's where people and planet are as important, or if not more important than everything else. But it's that tension between the enterprise that has to work and be profitable in order to allow the other things to happen. And that's a particular challenge, but there's some particular magic when that comes together. I'm really happy to share these slides later. So if people need facts and figures, we can easily access that. Let's zero in on Street. So our business structure, there's lots of different business structures that social enterprises can have. We happen to be a company limited by guarantee. We're an accredited social enterprise with social traders. And we're also a registered charity. So that helps a lot. That gives us what's called DGR status. That means people can make a donation and get a tax receipt for it. So that's helpful. We run a whole bunch of profitable businesses. This is the definition, by the way. In black, the definition of social enterprise per social traders. So you have to run a profitable business, which we do. In the olden days, about 3 months ago before COVID, we had 11 thriving businesses. A handful of them are on their knees at the moment doing takeaway. So it's a very different scenario today than it was in 3 months, and where we hope it will come back to. Our mission is really explicitly around training and employment pathways for young people experiencing marginalisation and experiencing barriers to employment. We have an equal top line mission around environmental contribution. And it's not just about not hurting the planet, it's about making a positive contribution to the planet. For us to be considered a social enterprise, we have to derive the majority of our income from business. So 73% was the last financial year. It's actually about 85% pre-COVID at the moment. And the majority of profit has to go back into the mission. So for us, that's 100%. So Beck and I, as the founders, are employed along with everybody else I'm sorry for everyone who wants to go into this area, but you're not going to make money if you come into this space. Profitable businesses should be able to pay their employees, and that's a part of sustainability. So you'll get paid as an employee, but it's not a get-rich-quick scheme for individuals. But that's not why you're in this game anyway. The only reason I have this slide up here is because, one, to make the point around evidence-based. So for us, it's really important to be as evidence-based as possible, because otherwise there are so many directions you could go in, and you may or may not make a significant impact. So the key figures here are just around, and again, this is pre-COVID, the number of unemployed people and the subset of young people there, underemployed, and then marginally employed as well. And using employment as a proxy for marginalisation, which is really the thing that locks lots of young people out. Our purpose is very clearly in terms of working with young people. So it's sitting alongside the environmental goals we have, but we pivot everything around healthy self, healthy work, and healthy home. And our training programs and our support programs are aligned very much around that. And we'll talk about impact and measurement later, but how we measure ourselves and how we hold ourselves accountable come back to these three things really explicitly. This slide is a little hard to see. I appreciate that. Again, happy to provide the details. But just to give a sense of the issues that our young people face, 100% of them are not in educational training when they come to us. So if a young person has finished school and just can't get a job for a month or two, they don't need us for that support. 95% under or unemployed. So 1 or 2 out of a class of 10 might have one shift once a fortnight somewhere, very precariously employed. 80% identify as socially isolated. Past and present mental health issues. Over half of them have been a victim of violence. Trauma is a significant thing in our society. Past or present homelessness, at least half. Drug and alcohol problems, 45%. So I'll show you in a minute our entry sort of criteria. Because we're a therapeutic program, but we're not a therapy program, we actually can't work with young people who have unmanaged mental health. That means they can't attend a training program, or if they have unmanaged drug and alcohol issues. However, if it's under management and they can attend, then that's not a barrier for us. But that obviously involves some very empathic questions and listening very carefully to the answers. This is one of coming back to data and evidence, this is one of the things that we have built an entire program around. We know that where a young person can keep their job for 12 months, it results in an 85% chance of being permanently employed for the rest of their life. That's incredible. So we had a 6-month program, and then what we did was we went, why aren't we going harder and further and providing that runway of 12 months for young people? We're working really hard to try and find good employers at the end of our program. Because we're a transitional program, people stay with us for 6 months or 9 months if they do the small one as well. But we went, why don't we have a supported employment program where we partner with some external employers and use a few employment slots within our own businesses as well, and add 6 months of proper paid employment, but keep the holistic support wrapped around it. So you kind of go from nest to training wheels. And what we've found is the outcomes following that are fantastic. These young people really get a chance to do their stuff. There's a whole bunch of ingredients that go into it. It sounds easy to say just employ young people and give them some support. I can see Daniela nodding. It's not. There's a devil of detail that goes into it, and it's around really understanding what each person needs. So we've sort of split it out into 4 things. So there's the training elements, which is really around the skills. And that's kind of the easy bit, really. But that's the bit that if they were able to wander off to the local TAFE and get it, they would. But there's things that get in the way of that. So So if you drop down further on the screen there, we look at personal support. So we have individual case management. I have a team of 7 youth workers, social workers, psychologists. We have a therapy dog. We have vocational specialists, employment specialists, whose job it is to walk alongside the person one-on-one and essentially help them navigate the system. And to do that for a solid 12 months, if that's required, and also beyond. We might sort of formally end the program, but we have a very strong drop-in and alumni connection with our graduates. What we found was they told us that the training was important and the work was important, but the thing that was most important to our trainees when we went back and did the proper evaluation repeatedly over years was actually a sense of connection and belonging. So people didn't want a job on their own. They wanted a job in a team of 4 or 5 people. And they wanted to come back to the same team of people week in, week out, to belong, to be a part of something meaningful and something real. And that taps then back into the work element of it. So every single one of our businesses exists for the sole purpose of providing that training and employment. But we have one trainee at a time embedded in a professional team of 4 or 5 staff. And they become the sort of the workplace mentors, if you like, with a little m, or trainers, but not in a formal TAFE sense. TAFE sits alongside, it's separate. They come down and deliver that on our premises, so we don't have to send people up the street. But they get to come to work, and they work in a small team, and get to learn how to get on with people, learn how to not get on with people, learn how to make mistakes, learn how to take feedback, all of the stuff that goes into that. And at the end of that, there's a sense of pride around the skills, but there's a bigger sense of satisfaction around the connection. And that's actually the glue, I think, that pulls a lot of this together. The criteria are pretty straightforward for young people. We do work with work age young people, so 16 to 24 there. They need to be eligible for employment in Australia because that's the end game for us. So that gives us quite some internal grief and distress around a large number of refugee and asylum seekers who don't have working status in Australia. So we can certainly offer work experience, but it's very difficult. We're not going to put somebody into an illegal working situation where they don't have all the employment protections. And then you'll see down the bottom there, 3 to 6 months clean off drugs. So that's really just around their ability to be able to come to work safely for themselves, for the customers, and so on. So occasionally young people either aren't ready to do that, in which case we just defer the enrolment. They come back when they are, and we'll hook them up very strongly with the supports they might need in the meantime. So we've had some young people start a program 2 or 3 or 4 times. We're delighted when they come back. They never drop out. We're just sort of pausing their participation. We started with literally some food carts in Federation Square in Melbourne. For anyone who knows Melbourne, that was a crazy idea. Don't do that. It gets really hot, really cold. We're not allowed to advertise. We couldn't sell coffee. And there's a slight incline at Federation Square, which means you're pushing these 1-ton carts with a whole bunch of grumpy teenagers at 8 in the morning up a hill, and it's not good for anybody. So we have a beautiful premises now, and this is 10 years on, so we're 10 years old now. There's an amazing story behind this that if there's time later on, I'll tell you about a benefactor who effectively donated this to us. So it's a beautiful story. But this is Cromwell Street in Collingwood. So this is our sort of headquarters. It's our main cafe. It's an 80-seat cafe there. There's a training room up the back is where the young people do get their TAFE training. TAFE comes to us, and several businesses are here. So we've got our bakery, artisan bakery, the coffee roastery, a catering business, the a la carte kitchen, and then the large cafe as well. But we've got smaller little kiosks dotted around the CBD. That's the garden there. It's beautiful. We're starting horticulture training as well for young people because there's something quite nice about getting your hands dirty and not having to work in a sort of public-facing environment as well. It's actually very, very therapeutic. That's one of our young trainees programs. I won't go into masses of detail because you get the picture. We have little workshop tasters, entrees, an 8-week individual program just for work experience. Main course is our main program. It's 20 weeks, just shy of 6 months. And that's where there's the TAFE element, personal support. We run a work readiness. We used to call it life skills, and they said, look, we know it's life skills. We want the life skills, but don't call it that because it feels insulting. So we changed it to work readiness. but they didn't say, they said keep all the stuff in it because we need the life skills. And then that rolls into everyone who finishes main course and certain young people in entree are eligible for Streets Ahead, which is the 6-month paid employment program. And there's positions inside a street and with some external partners who we select so carefully. And there's a minimum number of hours, they have to pay minimum wage. And then my staff continue to provide at least fortnightly support, sometimes it's more, to both the young person and their manager for 6 months. And we run a whole training series for our own staff, and then the staff from these other organisations get to come and attend those sessions as well. So it might be around boundaries, or it might be around de-escalation, or it might be around how to work with someone on the autism spectrum, or it might be around anxiety and depression, or our most successful one that was oversubscribed was around gender and sexuality diversity. So there's lots of things that people need to know about working with diverse people. The therapy dog Magic nails it. She's the highest rating part of our program at 112%. At one point, she came in at 150%, which just proves we don't teach maths well enough. But some of the things they tell us are just beautiful. There's a lot of research around the benefit of therapy animals, of dogs in particular. But some of the things like, I don't know, they don't say mean things or tease you. It does make it easier to learn. It fills up your bucket over and over and over. And I can take Madge, I'm her handler. I can take her into the room, and she'll have a hard time choosing who to sit next to, because she's a Labrador and a Kelpie, so she's a little bit of ADHD. She loves everybody, but she intuitively will choose someone who just really needs it. And you can just see the anxiety levels come down, and then the frontal lobe's back on, and people can use their words and they can connect, or maybe just stay in the room, and maybe that's a massive achievement for the day. That's her hard at work. I'll leave this just for the notes, but just as a visual, this is an example of a cafe. It happens to be called All Press. It's around the corner from the street. It's about the same size as us. It does about the same amount of trade. Has suppliers, has investors, has customers, and at the time we drew this up, about the same number of staff. So just for anyone who's harbouring the idea that it's an easy thing to run a social enterprise, I don't want to scare you away. My suggestion is that you go work in one before you kick off your own. But if you add in all the different elements that we deal with at Street, you've got a whole bunch of other factors in the mix as well. And Daniela would have her own version of this, but you need to deal with your employees or your trainees who are also beneficiaries and need support. You need to deal with their future employees. You need to deal with specialist service providers. You need to deal with referring agencies. We have over 180 referring agencies. We have no geographic restrictions. We've got a certain board of management that you need to have that a straightforward cafe doesn't. We're committed to being evidence-based, so there's research and policy. There's other social enterprises. One of our 10 things in our strategic plan is to give back to the sector that gave back to us to start with. So it's about bringing the sector along as well, other funders. So it's busy. It's a busy thing to do. I might stop there, Nazia. I've talked quite quickly, I think.
Oh, I'm just blown away, and especially the last two diagrams that you just highlighting that complexity of a social enterprise and all the things that are kind of involved. I know I've been kind of really joking around, going, today is all about coffee and donuts, but really what you sort of highlighted is that coffee is I guess a means that you picked, right? But Absolutely. Actually, there's just so much more to what you're sort of delivering. And I'm just absolutely blown away. So some things that I think are kind of interesting to talk about is one, the wraparound services, right? So why isn't it enough just to give young people work experience? Why do we need the wraparound services?
If it was enough to give work experience, then people wouldn't need organisations like Crofney and Street. They would simply be able to walk out and be competitive in the employment market. But life is not fair, and there are I'm on a bit of a thing at the moment, Nazia, so forgive me. I'll just do a mini rant. I'm on a bit of a thing at the moment about language. You talk about marginalised or disadvantaged young people, or people with barriers, but the barriers don't belong to the people. The barriers are things that have been put up generally by the system that work mostly for many people, but actually don't work for lots and lots of people. So So the reason why we need support in organisations like this is to redress the gap that is there and is of no fault of the person themselves. Perhaps they were born with a certain condition, perhaps they were born into a certain family, perhaps they had some random experiences along the way, perhaps they made some bad decisions along the way, but none of that adds up to not deserving to be able to participate in society. So it sort of comes back to social inclusion in a big way, and there are lots of bridges that need to be built there. So I remember we have one of our cafes is at one of the youth prisons, and it's technically on the outside of the prison, but it's actually on prison property. And the young people come out on day release, do their work experience, go back inside. But it's so we're able to give them that work experience and that experience of working for real whilst they're still incarcerated. And then they come into our programs if they're interested, and if not, we help them get into other programs if that's what they need going forward. And I was blown away by the fact that, well, actually, I'll pose this as a question. Have a guess how many decisions, okay, the average person, you or I, and lots of our listeners, would make approximately how many decisions do you think we would make a day?
Oh my goodness, that is a really tough question. Daniela, do you want to take a guess?
And have a go.
I would say in excess of 200.
Okay, it's in excess of 20,000.
Wow.
20,000 little micro decisions we make every single day. And so then if you think about a young person in prison, okay, and they can't decide when they eat, they can't decide when the light gets turned on or off, they can't even decide when to walk through a door. If they're lucky and have the right privileges and have a toilet in their cell, they might be able to decide when to go to the toilet. They can't decide what to wear. So part of that is around just the horrificness of being in prison as a child. Like, there are kids as young as 10 in our prison system. But when you step outside of that and then you're released, you get, typically, I think you get about a fortnight or something, maybe a month of time where you don't have to search for a job. You should be provided with accommodation, but pretty much you're spat out into the system and you're expected to participate in society with the rest of everybody else. But just from getting from your temporary accommodation to, even if you were enrolled at street, for example, and there's this really warm welcome, this safety net there of everybody ready and willing to help you, the amount of things that can befall you and happen in between. I mean, you have to get out of bed to start with, but assuming you can get up and assuming you happen to have an alarm clock in your set of possessions, which most young people don't coming out of prison, there's at least 50 things that can go wrong between hopping out of bed and coming to us. And some of these things are little micro decisions, but it just adds up to so many things. And you then, maybe you don't have friends who help you make good decisions. Maybe you don't have a family that's supportive of going to work. So this is why it's incredibly important to have a really calm, friendly, individually tailored, understanding of each person's needs, and then to make a plan that works for them in line with their goals. The first question we ask is, do you actually want to work, and do you want to work vaguely in hospitality? It doesn't have to be the end game, but do you want to work in this enough to have a crack at this? And if they say no, they're not punished, but we'll help them find somewhere else that does match better, because you don't want to line someone up for something that isn't lined up with their goals. Otherwise they're destined to fall over and then kind of get punished for that. So, sorry, that was a very long way of answering your question. No, there's lots of issues that humans need help with, and if we aren't lucky enough to have a family or the genetic predisposition to give us a head start on that, then we all need a bit of a hand to get that going.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a really beautiful answer, and a lot of detail, because I think today's session is about changing the narrative of employment, right? And I guess it's kind of we're trying to highlight discuss why it's important to think about employment differently, and particularly when we think about persistent unemployment or people that have experienced generations of unemployment, why we need to be doing things differently, and all the complexities. It's not always as straightforward as sometimes maybe we're led to believe. So thank you so much. That was really amazing. And so Daniela, we'd love to hear from you around CROFNE, and so take us through CROFNE, and then there's so much to talk about on this topic. So
I'm just going to share a screen. I'm going to attempt to share a screen, Nazia.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
Beautiful.
that's, there you go. I'm just, okay. I'm sharing some photos of some of our team. So at the moment, we employ upwards of 16 people with a disability, and that also includes autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome, and other disabilities that are known. So with what Kate was touching on, like employment is really, really, really vital for a person's self well-being, their capacity to be able to provide to the workforce, their coexistence with their work colleagues. I mean, these photos that you're seeing, they're all about people having meaningful employment, actually having somewhere to go for work, being able to contribute, being able to earn their own money. It's been really challenging for us setting up a business. I've had no experience in bakery. I have had experience in running other businesses. And one thing I can say to the listeners out there is, you know, if you think this is easy, as Kate said, it is absolutely not. And if you think if you think you're starting up a social enterprise to make some money, you're not. Think again. This isn't the business for you. You really need to have a purpose to start a business like this, and you need to have it at your heart, because if you're not 100% involved in this business for the right reasons, you will not succeed at all. We have to deal on a daily basis with a number of different organisations. We're consistently having meetings with the NDIS. We're consistently having meetings with disability service employment providers. We're having meetings with parents. We're having meetings with teachers. We're having meetings with schools. We're having meetings with suppliers. I mean, the list is absolutely endless. And again, unless you are really 100% committed to your cause, it won't work. I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart that it is a really, really hard slog. However, I can tell you it is extremely rewarding as well. I just look at some of my staff, and what we get just by working with them is absolutely phenomenal. The love and the smiles that we see on their faces, the thanks from their families, it's just incredible. It's just such an incredible journey. So one of the things that, I think, sorry guys. One of the things that since opening this business is that I've realised that there is such a gap for people with a disability and people that are on the spectrum to find work. So this has actually led me into developing a program called Team Coach. Now the Team Coach actually is a bit of a unique system that will address the needs of getting autistic people into the workforce. With a view, once we pilot it with the autistic people, it's actually going to expand to other disabilities. It will work quite well. And the way we're going to do that is having I actually have a framework here. Sorry guys, I didn't know how to share this one on the screen. But essentially what we're doing is we're identifying the interests of the client employees. So the client employees are the people with the disabilities. And then we're actually looking at the employers as well. So what are the needs of the employers? How can we actually address those needs by finding the right people to actually fit within those roles? We're going to have an intake process for the employees. So looking at their skills and interests. You can't just even within our own organisation, we have to find out actually what people's strengths are, where are they really good at, what are they really good at, what actually interests them, what actually motivates them, what wakes them up every morning to come to work? What is it that they're really, really good at? And quite often we get people that approach us, and we go through this discovery process with them, and we find that actually they're really not suited to a customer service role. So we'll actually assist them in identifying other things that they're capable of doing or interested in doing, and then putting them forward to other agencies or other organisations that may actually assist them. Part of the challenges that I have, or one of the challenges that I have, is quite often parents actually try to force their children into work, and which is, I believe if you can contribute, you need to work. There's no questions asked. But parents sometimes just want their child to work. They don't actually look at what their child actually wants to do. They just say, no, they need to work. And that's actually been a bit of a hindrance. Also, parents are not allowing their child to work in excess of 8 hours or 12 hours because they're on the DSP. And this is a mindset that we're actually trying to change. Again, we have work, so why can't your child work? They're getting paid. They should be able to work. You shouldn't have to rely on the DSP if work is available for them to work at. So these are some challenges that we're faced with on many occasions. So also what we're doing is we're doing training, work and industry-based skills as well. So depending on the industry that we're getting into, with the training program, we're also going to be looking at how to train the person with autism or with a disability into that workspace with industry-specific trainers, and also educating the people that they're actually working with. So part of the problem that we've realised, and actually doing a lot of consultation, is that regardless of what disability you actually have, and regardless of what workplace you're going into, if somebody has actually been employed, they're actually unaware of actually how to speak to somebody on the spectrum, or how to actually just have a regular conversation with them, and that's actually a really big barrier. And it's usually often because of their own inhibitions, their own prejudices, and once that's all broken down, it makes for a much better and more inclusive workspace. We also are going to be evaluating this program. We're going to have after 1 and 3 months. We're also being very fortunate that Austrade has actually got in touch with me, and we're going to actually be running a pilot program with them. So that's really exciting. So we're putting a first cohort of people through Austrade, and they're actually, I'm so excited about this. They're actually giving us a broad overview of the types of tasks that actually need to be done. So they're actually creating a number of positions, and they're actually going to be tailoring those positions to the autistic people after we do the discovery process. So we're going to be marrying both of these organisations and the people together to get a really great outcome. So I'm just so excited about that. That's just hopefully it's going to be changing a lot of lives. So I suppose one of the main things is like, we want to ensure maintainable and sustainable employment. So it's actually about getting the workplace to understand inclusiveness, and to create a culture that's actually inclusive, and not putting up barriers, and for the employer for the employee to remain confident, and knows how to ask for assistance. These are all factors that need to be addressed in every workplace, not just if you're working with an autistic person or somebody with Down syndrome. It's in the wide scope of being an inclusive inclusive employer. And with Krofner, you can see those photos coming up. We have some amazing staff. Some of them are young uni students, some of them are experienced support people. But what we do is we actually train our staff to work alongside our disabled staff. So not to actually do the job for them, but to actually assist them in maintaining the workspace. So that's my husband in the kitchen, not that one. Yes, everything look, there's a part of the production process there. But it's just it's an incredible journey. But I can just say that if you're thinking about starting up a social enterprise, like for us, it was just fortunate that I had a donut recipe. For Kate, it was coffee. You have to have something to be able to provide that employment opportunity. So I often say, we don't employ people to bake donuts. We bake donuts to employ our staff. And that's what it is. It's not actually about the donuts. It's actually about providing the pathway to employment, independence, self-worth, and participation within the community. For us, that's what it's about, Nazia.
It's just brilliant. Honestly, I cannot get over the two of you, what sensational and intelligent and resilient human beings you both are to be doing what you're doing. Actually, so Daniela, I met you I think at Gungahlin Markets when I was
that's right, yeah,
donuts, right? And it was like that. I really shouldn't be eating donuts. And then I went, oh no, but their donuts were different, so it's okay. And it was such a wonderful meeting. And we had conversations, and you talked about how your inbox was always flooded with parents looking for employment for their kids. So tell me, I guess both of you a little bit about what kind of a difference you think it makes to an individual young person who you've been able to provide meaningful employment to, because it is much bigger than just having dollars or whatever. It's Kate, you talked about social connectedness, and you have some very clear domains in your measurement framework as well. And Daniela, you talked about so many aspects as well. So tell me a little bit about what you think it means to the young people.
Well, I can give you an example of my son Anthony. So he prompts me every Monday, where am I working this week, Mum? And if I haven't put him up on the roster, he'll just hound me until it's done. He needs to know. He likes to get up. He likes to work. He likes to contribute. He likes to buy his lunch. I mean, that's that's one of these things that he really enjoys doing with his own money. He wants to take control. He just because he's got a disability doesn't mean that he can't be afforded the same human rights as what me and you and everybody else takes for granted. It's a sense of belonging. It's knowing that he's got a responsibility, that he needs to get up and go to work on the days that he's rostered. I mean, what can I say? It's just it's self-worth. It's making a contribution.
Beautiful.
I don't have anything to add other than to say they're the reasons I go to work each day. I think that's the case for most people who have a job that they connect with. That's why it's important.
Yeah, it's amazing. So on that sort of, Kate, kind of, I was going to ask you, because you are the Chief Impact Officer, you're a guru at measuring impact for social enterprises. So I was wondering if you would be able to give us, I know there's a lot of people watching who are in the social enterprise space, or they're thinking about, wishing about, starting their own social enterprise or a social change initiative. I was wondering if you could give us your kind of top 5 tips.
Totally, I will.
Impact.
Yeah,
Thank
I will.
you.
Danielle, do you mind if I grab the screen back?
Sorry, my apologies.
No, that's okay. I just don't know how to do it.
stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Great. So I'm a bit of a nerd with this stuff, and I think it comes partly just because I have a sense of accountability. I think it's important, even if you're leading with the heart, I think it's important to be able to demonstrate why people should put their trust in you, put their time with you, and if they're investing with you, put their money with you as well. It also helps that as a psychologist, we're taught if anything moves, we measure it. So I do like measuring things a bit. And so the holy grail I think in this kind of sector is to be able to put your hand on your heart and say you're doing as evidence-based as possible practice. And that's got to be tempered with reality. You've got to be able to, you can't sit and do a PhD on a thing for 4 years before you make a decision. So my rule of thumb, if there's a 30% likelihood that it's going to work and it's going to do no harm, you should give it a go. But you should pay careful attention to the conditions under which you're doing it so that you have an understanding of why the thing works or doesn't work, and what it is about those component parts so that you can do the same again or change it going forward. It is incredibly important that the practice that you do is in line with your organisational goals and values. So sort of coming back to your true north, like understanding the purpose that Danielle has spoken a lot about as well, and the purpose of the organisation. They should be aligned with yourself, but that there might be a very specific purpose of the organisation, and you can't measure whether you've achieved something unless you know what it is you're trying to achieve. So both Beck and I we come from a science background, so we're very big on evidence base. If it's there, our thirst for knowledge and best practice is sort of matched by, I guess, the bigness of our purpose and intention, and that feels like the right balance. If your heart is as big as your head around the knowledge, then that's a good balance to go. So we do a lot, we contribute a lot and participate a lot in research. There's probably 80 research activities over the last 10 years that we've participated in, not all led by us. Lots of people come and ask to do case studies with us, and we've been the part of some large research projects as well, led by really reputable universities and so on, which is fantastic for us. Like, that gives us the independence that brings us, and the credibility is brilliant. So we love partnering with universities. We have a theory of change, which is just a fancy way of saying what's your purpose and then how do you break it down? What's your pathway for getting there? But really simply, in terms of the young people, our purpose, you can see the top line there, is to help young people thrive and belong with a healthy sense of work, self and home. Okay, so we do training and employment, we sell coffee and bread and food, but the purpose is about thriving and belonging. So that tells us what to measure. We do measure how many coffees we serve, but that's not how we measure our success. We measure our success in terms of young people's sense of belonging and their, the other elements of that purpose statement there. We've actually put belonging front and center in our KPIs. So, and we've put a target on it. We say that we want 90% of our trainees to be able to say that they feel they belong at Street. And we ask them that question, and we have that question asked in as independent way as possible, so that it's not asked by the people who are teaching them or coaching them or training them. And we go to extreme lengths to try and create atmospheres of belonging for our young people. So we consult them at the end of every program. We ask them what would make a difference. We ask them what does work, what we should change, what we should keep the same around that. Everyone loves stats and facts, so we can measure the outputs. The outputs are the number of young people, the number of hours of support and training, the businesses, the customers. The bit that I get excited about is at the bottom of the page here. Not even the completion rate and the employment and training outcomes I'm incredibly proud of, but I think that's pride I have in our trainees and what they've achieved. The stuff that I'm proud of for Street is that young people feel they belong. 93%, they rate the program. So we get them to give a report card on Street. They rate the program at 90%, and they rate the dog at 132%, which again proves my point that they're not very good at statistics. But for the funders, it's the completion rate, it's the employment and training outcomes, and so on. And even though we're now 80-something% self-funded, there's still a big gap, like, $1 million or something gap, where Beck spends a massive amount of time running around trying to find grants and funders. So we need to be able to demonstrate why they should invest in us, in a social impact sense. If it's possible, and it not always is, but increasingly it is, if it's possible to get a kind of an external baseline, a reference point to compare to. And I felt so excited when I found this data just under a year ago, because what I can now do is point to external people that the completion rate for people enrolled in a Cert 2 level training, which is what we offer our trainees, we have 85% of our class complete the program. Now that's with almost a 1-to-1 ratio of support worker to trainee. It's a 5-to-1 ratio of staff with one trainee embedded. It's about a 20% operational cost on the entire business to be able to support a young person through. And we absolutely think that's worth it. That's how we get 85% of our young people to complete. The Australian average, this breaks my heart for our education system, the tertiary TAFE system, the completion rate is 40%. For people going up the road to TAFE to complete a Cert 2. And the percentage of those that complete and are in training and employment 6 months after completion. So this is where Daniella's point around the follow-up is so important, because it's one thing to kind of help people through or carry them through, or some groups push them through, not many, but you can get through the door, but can you stay? Can you keep the job is of course the main game there. So 76% of those that complete the street program are in employment or training 6 months after. The Australian average is 16%, which just tells us that there are a lot of young people out there, or a lot of people doing it tough, and probably needing a hand with it. I think we need to do our education and employment better across the board. This one I put up just to make the point that, again, data helps. We had some RMIT did some amazing research for us that basically let us know that we were able to cost out how much it costs us to put a young person through our training program, the 6-month training program. So we know that costs us $18,000 to put them through, or $32,000 is saved per year, every year, for those young people going forward in the rest of their life after they've completed our program. So that's when you take account of all the things that they no longer need, like medical services or emergency services or housing services or drug and alcohol support and so on. So this was done top-down modelling, but also bottom-up. We did research interviews with young people who had finished our program 10 years ago. They're no longer young, they're thriving adults, and asked them how many times had X, Y, and Z happened before and after the program. And we're not claiming all the credit for that. In fact, I give all the credit to them, but we can claim a contribution that we did assist in there. So data really helps when it comes to measuring and reporting impact, if you can get it. We use a bunch of tools down at the micro level with the individuals. We marry, this is just a little table that talks about which tool and what it measures. And I have a rule that says it has to be helpful in the process, not just for measurement. So we use it very strongly in the support and case management plans that we make for the young people. You can see down the bottom, it adds up to no more than 30 minutes of time for the young person. And that's if somebody has a primary school education level of literacy. So we're not placing a massive burden on them. And then you link it up to your outcomes and your big goals as well. So this looks really fancy. It's just a simple aggregated table. This is far too complicated. So what I'm doing now in COVID lockdown is going through the process of simplifying this. I'll probably take it back to one measure, which will be the outcome star, and maybe 2 or 3 behavioural measures across each of those areas to make it easier, more elegant, simpler, and much more user-friendly for the trainees and for my staff. Because even 30 minutes, 3 times across a 6-month or a 12-month period, still we're not getting a regular uptake of it, and it's still annoying. It's annoying for people, and if measurement's annoying, they're not going to do it. And if they're not going to do it, we're not going to have the data and the measurement evidence, if you like, to speak to it. So getting to the principles, I'll flip over that. It's a good point to remember that evaluation is political. How you measure and what you measure is a privilege of the person measuring it. So the more you can do it in combination is better. I have, these were my top 5 tips, Nazia. Working out your true north. Less is more. That's the process I'm going through now, simplifying it down. There is no point having the cleverest thing in the world if only 10 or 20 or 30% of your data comes through. You're better off having one measurement point that you can have consistently and across the board. Qualitative is important. That's what the funders want. That's what the politicians want. But qualitative tells the story. So marry the two up and just be clever about your questions. My point before, it's got to be helpful in the process. I think out of respect for the people whose time we're using with this, it has to be helpful for the journey. It's got to teach a person something about themselves, about their strengths. But one of the tools we use is a strengths survey. And the young people love it because it's the first time often someone has sat down and spent 20 minutes talking nothing except their strengths. And we use a very strengths-based approach as that as well. I'd recommend for anyone getting into this game that if you do get a grant or you do put in an application, build in a line that says measurement and evaluation, and it might just be getting the forms filled in, but as a rough rule of thumb, it's about 10 to 15% of your budget for that particular program. And the more you put it in there, the more it gets included, but it pays itself off 10 times over at the end. And if you can't get it in as a line item, just do the simplified version because it will pay it forward for you anyway. In terms of using the data, again, simple is good. So we use a lot of infographics and headlines. We use it repeatedly. And I make sure everybody can give the headline spiel around why Street exists, what it achieves, and how we measure that. And then you'll see here that I had 7 tips. That's because we're under-promising and always over-delivering, which was cleverer than I meant to be. I wrote 5 and then I gave 7 and then I see what I did there. Anyway.
I love that. I love that.
And just a couple of inspiring quotes. But I think this is the most inspiring stuff, and it's back to the words. And you know, when you said to Daniela, how do you know you make a difference? And she said, well, let me tell you, in the words of my son, it's back to the experience of the people who you are walking alongside and helping. And you know, still some of these make me cry. Street kept me from doing bad things. You weren't afraid of my rap sheet. He's not talking about music. Magic, that's the name of the dog, helps my head just by being there. I would be dead or insane without this program. It's the first time someone respected me. So no one here is saying I got a job and I earned money. That's important, and it's around sustainable livelihoods and respect. But underneath that is relationships, and so this is the in between stuff that people get out of it. It's easy to feel you belong if someone cares. Not many people care in my world. You're like my family. So you know, like Daniela, that's the reason we get out of bed. These are some of our trainees with their cardboard graduation hats that we cut out every time. And we have to make new ones every time because they take them home. They keep them and they love it. So yeah, anyway, that's my top 5.
Oh, that's amazing. It's just so gorgeous. I loved your tips. So I'm just gonna let our audience know that please do send in your questions. We're nearly at Q&A time. Tell me about your indicator of, so obviously you would have gone through many iterations, I'm assuming, over the 10 years, right? To modify your program and what you're measuring. And this sense of belonging, that's your kind of focus indicator. Tell me how you arrived at that being your kind of main indicator, your key thing to focus on.
Oh, look, it's a little bit embarrassing because as a psychologist, I know this and I should know it. And, you know, most humans know it, but it took a number of years of getting too tangled up in the, not the cleverness, but in the business and in writing, plans and programs and reports to actually take a step back and listen to what the trainees were telling us. So one of the things that I did was I asked for a score for the different elements of the program, and they take a lot of pride and strength, and they don't pull their punches in telling you what they think should and shouldn't change about the program. They're very comfortable to tell you if there's something wrong with it, which is great because it means that if you get half a compliment, then you know that's real. But what I wrote down as we went along were the comments that people made. And I just had that in a separate file. And we redid our theory of change and looked at all the connector bits, what I like to call the glue. Kind of if you had a bucket of rocks, and it would be the sand that falls in between all the bits. And that was all the stuff around connection and belonging. And there is decades of literature and research on this as well. So you don't need to be a psychologist. We feel I need to prove everything and write it all down and demonstrate it in studies. But you don't need to be a psychologist to know that connection and belonging is a fundamental part of the human condition. But to have that connection and belonging that works for you from your perspective, not from my perspective, not from the way someone else wants to do it, but that works for the individual. And so once we actually really listened to that, we didn't actually have to change a lot. We just reoriented it. We reprioritized things, and we certainly changed the way we spoke about it. And that resonated really strongly, not just with the trainees, but it resonated really strongly with external people as well. Like, everybody got it. And so very much, work readiness and hospitality and coffee and bakery or front of house, back of house is, that's a vehicle. They're the skills, they're important. It's what gets you the job. You can't keep the job if you're crap at it, but the stuff that gives you satisfaction, the stuff that gives us meaning as human beings, and it's the same for our trainees. It's the same for a person whether they have a disability or have whatever life experience. We're all in it together. That's the stuff that makes a difference when you go to work. So it was really when we sort of stopped and stood back and listened and put it in the words of the people that that we're in service of.
That's absolutely gorgeous. I want to talk about the future a little bit, right? And, you're both embarking on some exciting journeys. Daniela, that's really exciting when you talked about Austrade and the fact that they're, going through their tasks and working with you to increase the participation of differently abled people into the workplace. So, we're in like a ridiculously crazy time, obviously, right? And so, and employment is, and not just employment, but so many things are kind of front and center. And as if things weren't hard already, now we have all these extra challenges. Youth unemployment, I think in the last few months, we've gone from something like 11% to 16%, and that's just the sort of general population. But at the same time, I kind of feel as though, there, notwithstanding all the negative aspects, there might be some positive aspects in that we are all starting to, be more empathetic, think about the future in a different way, a future that we actually all want to be a part of. That's more than, I guess, just economic outcomes and things like that. So tell me a little bit about what you think is going to change in terms of the future of employment, but particularly from, we say, we use that term disadvantaged. I have some issues with that term, but I guess that's the general kind of term that we talk about. But I like the way that you talked about it, Kate, that it's I guess like a system disadvantaging kind of people. But what do you think the future will look like? What is some? It's a big question, obviously.
Yeah.
So you're kind of.
Do you know what, Nazia?
Yeah.
I think it's very scary times ahead. Unfortunately, we don't know how long this COVID is going to be around. However, I think you're right. I think this has actually brought out some people, different feelings in people. What life, how can I put this in the right words? I'm not sure, but I'll try, give it a go. People, I think, are identifying that, they're being restricted, and I think they're realising, more people are realising that, well, they're being restricted. How is it going to be like for somebody with a disability or on autism or something like that? I think people are probably opening their minds slightly, or being a bit more open to inclusion. I mean, just for our business, we have our sales have, even though we've cut down to 3 pop-ups, our sales have actually remained quite steady, and in some instances even exceeded what we even thought we would actually even do. And that's because people are actually supporting our social enterprise because of our social cause. So I think people's minds are shifting slightly. I'm hoping that they are anyway. And as far as employment goes, well, I think it's difficult for everybody out there, but if you've got a disability or you're disadvantaged in some way, it's even a lot harder. But I think education is the key to this, Nazia. I think by educating our peers, our colleagues, our businesses that we deal with, the wider community, that will certainly be hopefully making a change and a bit of an impact and opening those employment opportunities.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Daniela. What about you, Kate? What's your perspective? I know, it's been lots of challenges being in Melbourne and being in hospitality that you're facing. What do you think how are we going to overcome this, or how are we going to rebuild for the future?
Wow, you're bringing out all the little trivial questions today, aren't you, Nazia?
Yeah, that's right.
It's big stuff. Look, but no, you're right. They're real questions, and they're here. They're timely questions. It's back to the unemployment rates. It used to be there were 5 people competing for every one job. A couple of weeks ago it was 13 for every available job, and that would have gone through the roof even more so. And the people that we work with would have been struggling to be in 5th place originally. Now that now they'll be behind another 13 people. I actually think I'm just hardwired to be optimistic, and happily for a pandemic, I'm fairly hardwired. I'm a bit of a flatliner, like I'm not emotional. I get excited about lots of things, but I don't panic. And so I think that's actually very helpful in a pandemic, and a little bit of optimism goes a very long way. And I've seen some beautiful actions at an individual level and at a collective level of hope, of people essentially voting for hope over fear. I've seen some terrible things with fear, but some magnificent things around hope and people coming together. I actually think a pandemic like this it's the time for purpose businesses. It's the time for us to step forward. I think it's incredibly hard. I wouldn't recommend anyone start up a new startup at the moment, because it's no business is going to do well as a fledgling thing in this environment. But it's the time for us to band together. It's the time for us to create a collective, a movement, a collaboration, and that's what we're doing with Moving Feast, which is not just around kind of food and hospitality, but it's the food system. And if you're concerned about the environment, changing the way we do our food system is the single biggest impact that you can have on the environment. And it's also, it tips into, I calculated it's about 13 of the 18 Sustainable Development Goals are positively affected if we can rehabilitate the food system. So I think that's really powerful. And we can do that in a very for-purpose way. I see a phenomenal amount of possibilities for employment and training across that sector, particularly if it's a little bit coordinated, not controlled, but just, the social enterprise sector is remarkably collaborative. I mean, you both know this. I've worked in sort of private and government and also in not-for-profit, and you don't get the competition in this space. Literally, if somebody else out there can make a social enterprise bigger and better, our collective pie gets bigger. So anyone who's a social enterprise and knocks on my door and says, can you help me with this? I will say yes. And the only thing restricting me is the hours in the day, because if we can make the sector bigger, then everybody's pie gets bigger. And that's not the case in commercial competitive practice. And sadly, it's not the case in a lot of not-for-profits either, because they're actually competing for the same limited government dollars. But it's not a zero-sum game in social enterprise. So I don't know how it's going to play out. I do think it's going to take some big thinkers, some big brains, some innovation, some brave people to do that. But I'm still stunned that we talk about social enterprise, which stands in contrast to what must be anti-social enterprise, which is what the majority of our businesses and practices are doing. And they're generally not good for people, certainly not good for people who are excluded from the system. And by and large, they're not good for the environment either. So I think we should have more social businesses, social enterprises, pro people, pro environment. So I think our time has come. It's just how to sort of self-organise and do that, and maintain hope and self-care and strength as you do it. So this is a big shout out to all of your listeners. Come be part of the revolution.
That's right. And I mean, I was already pumped, and now I'm like kind of my level of being pumped is like through the roof. So that's really wonderful that that we're in hard times, but there's like amazing people such as yourselves. You've got so much to offer us. You've got all this leadership and direction and your experience, and it is tough times, and but I love that. It is I 100% agree with you that it is time for maybe like a revolution in social enterprises and a different way of working and education. Your point as well, Daniela. That's sort of really brilliant. So how can people get involved with Street? and with Crofney? How can the next wave of social change makers or people that are already kind of working in that space, like for inspiration, or what do you think is the way for us to kind of get together? And I've had one question: when is Street coming to Sydney? That's a really good question, Jodie. And I also wonder, when will Street come to Canberra?
Well, I grew up in Sydney and we lived in Canberra, and we'd love to be there, but anyway, I'll come back to that in a minute. I think Daniela should answer your question first.
Anybody can just get on the phone and give me a call, or send me an email. All my contact details are on our Facebook page, our web page as well. We'd more than welcome some volunteers, assistance. Part of my other business is just going through a very, very big NDIS audit. So, it's crazy times for me. But yes, all welcome. Welcome to come and have a talk or a sticky beak, or happy to help. In fact, Kate, I was actually just speaking to a bakery in Sydney, or a new upcoming bakery social enterprise this morning, just before this call actually, and I did mention that I was speaking to you. So.
I have no baking skills, but I have happy to help in any other way I can. And what you were saying about collaboration, absolutely. Yeah. Like I people reach out to me all the time, and I'm more than happy to share my experience, and if I can help them in any way, shape or form, I'm always there to put my hand up to assist. Fantastic. I actually just saw one of the comments pop up on the screen about how Street is already in Canberra in the form of Crofney, and then listed off a bunch of others. And that's where I was going to go in answering this question. I think that's a really, really good point. We're examples of what's possible. And so people shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking I need to be like Street or I need to be like Crofney. And I know we've both given our cautionary tales around, don't run out and try and start one of these things this week, because it's not quite the right business time to do that. But it's about making the pie bigger. And so I think there's several levels that people can do a lot to help directly and indirectly. Street is Melbourne-based, and we chose to come down to Melbourne rather than Sydney or stay in Canberra very deliberately. And it was just around the social enterprise kind of zeitgeist and sector a decade ago. That's totally different now. We could barely find a social enterprise in Canberra, and Sydney had a really different ethic and ethos around investment and money and so on. So we would make a different decision these days. But I don't think Street needs to be everywhere. I think we need people who think the same way we do to do the thing they're passionate about elsewhere. If you happen to be down in Melbourne, then actually the best way people can help us is doing business with us. I mean, donations, bequeathments, absolutely, but it's actually around, because we're a business model, so the more business we can do, the better. So it's around booking your event or booking your catering, or we're, like everybody, we've turned our hand to online workshops, so there's a bunch of those coming your way soon, and there's no restrictions around that with Zoom. So business is the way to help a social enterprise. The next thing after that, I think, for individuals who aren't in a position to spend money or to start your own social enterprise, is to align your personal values with your work as much as possible. And we know that's good for you individually, but we also know that's good for the world. So if every little decision you make, every step you take, just ask yourself, is this in the direction that lines up with my values that I want to go in for the future? And you will end up, like my weird little trajectory looking backwards somehow made sense, but it'll start to make sense looking forward as well. I think if we each make as many values-based decisions as we can that help people or the environment or whatever it is that you're passionate about. And then the third kind of point there, third layer, because I'm all about levels, would be if you are contemplating social enterprise as a career. There's 2 points. One, back to what Daniela and I have been saying, it's a bit of a crazy thing. Like if you actually knew what you were getting yourself into, it's not logical to do this. Like it's not. And that doesn't make us clever or brave. It just makes us a little bit silly. And it's good that humans are built this way, where your passion can override your logic. But the smart thing to do is to get involved in a social enterprise that's up and running, where you can learn it from the inside out. And that doesn't mean you have to then go and duplicate the same thing, but you can avoid so much of the hardship and the heartache that we went through, and like leapfrog us. Go and build a better Crofney, go and build a better Street, and we will give you our support with that, because that's how this sector works. So if you can make it better, let's do that. The other final point I'll make is that it's easy to think that you have to be an entrepreneur and have brilliant ideas and be really creative and really clever. And you've got to be agile and you can't let things get you down. But the world actually doesn't need 1 million more entrepreneurs. What it needs is people who are good at working in social enterprise. So, I wouldn't even count myself as a social entrepreneur. I'm married to one. My wife, Beck, is ridiculously creative and innovative. And I have to work hard to keep up with her. But she would be the kite in the air, but she would be off burning in the sun if I wasn't the string that connected her back down to earth. And if we didn't have the most rock solid executive on our team that keep things steady, and then if we didn't have underneath that it's different with COVID, but pre-COVID, let's say 50 solid staff who are the boots on the ground, who are incredibly capable at what they do and mission aligned with it. So there's so many possibilities in all of that for people to make a difference. So I'd go back to lining up your decisions with your values, and if you stick to that, you can't really go wrong, and it will make a difference, if not today, then tomorrow.
That's absolutely gorgeous. Being the change, right? Being the change that you want to see. Look, absolutely amazing. We've had a bunch of comments coming through. So okay, cool. So I think Kate McGeary, you've sent some questions through. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest for people wanting to work with you for sure. And wonderful, you're inspirational, Dr. Kate.
He's a plant.
I love working forestry.
That's my Damien. He's great.
Nice one, Damien. Thank you. We've had a comment around more support needed for youth transitioning early for education. Absolutely.
Yes.
And thank you, Cindy, for your comments as well. Cindy was talking about, so Cindy Mitchell is one of our panelists later on as well. She's an absolute social enterprise guru. So she was talking about that she's had similar social enterprise experiences where she thought it was about employment, but the participants told her that it was about feeling included. Yep. So, and how gorgeous. We've had a comment that this has been the best webinar that someone's attended since lockdown, and I'm absolutely not surprised because the two of you are absolutely brilliant. You're so inspirational, so hardworking, and super humble. So for me, it's been just nothing but an honor just to know the both of you to start with, and for you to give your time, share your just a snippet of your expertise and your passion and your knowledge. I hope that I'm sure that everyone who's watched this today, and hopefully who'll watch it, will put the recordings up, will benefit greatly on their social change journey. I just want to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for being a part of SICON. And looking forward to doing amazing things together. Is there anything that you wanted to share, Kate and Daniela, before we head off into the evening today?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to tell Daniela I think she's fantastic. And I know there's a whole bunch of people listening who are already doing fantastic stuff and will go on to do fantastic stuff. So thank you for doing that too.
Thank you.
Likewise, Kate, you're absolutely an inspiration. Absolutely. And thank you, Nazia. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, both of you. We've got one other question just about getting a copy of the slides. So
what's the best way to do that? I can send that in the chat now, or send it to you, Nazia, if you have a list of people. I'm happy to share it.
To us and we'll send it on. Thank you, everyone who spent your time watching. Really, really appreciate it. And have a wonderful evening. And there's a whole bunch of other SICON events as well. Please get online and take a look at what might interest you. And please keep in touch. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.